Welcome, everyone. I'm Sergeant Chelsea Baker.
I'm Sergeant Tim Andrews.
And we are kind of just going off of the last podcast. This is kind of a segment to what we were talking about before. So again, we have Lisa Mustard with the South Carolina National Guard Behavioral Health Department, as well as Eric Beasley, who is a marriage counselor. So I guess we'll just get started and get right back into what we were talking about.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were discussing was how depression can show up in male soldiers post-deployment, and we wanted to definitely touch on what that can look like for female soldiers. So it's a similar thing. Behavior changes for sure that are outside of the normal of what that female soldier would be normally, doing. That could be drinking more. That could be risky behaviors. You mentioned in the last one, like driving aggressively. Like those things are still going to show up.
Yes.
Possibly for females as well. The main difference is going to be how the female soldier is more than likely expressing her feelings. So you mentioned, we're talking about anger, men showing anger. Right. The Walmart, pushing the cart into Walmart. And, not really being society's the norm of seeing a guy crying in the magazine stand at Walmart, where it's like the opposite for women, right? It's okay for us to cry. It's okay for us to get emotional. That's kind of what we think of when women think of sadness and grief. And that's the same thing that the female soldiers are experiencing, but they're going to show it more so as sadness. Don't get me wrong. Anger will definitely be there as well, but it's potentially going to be showing up more as crying, emotional outbursts, things like that is what I have witnessed and have experienced. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's that sometimes what we see too is a isolation from close relationships. Yep. So they may pull back from families and friends, and that can be difficult to see right after homecoming, because there hasn't the reconnection hasn't necessarily fully happened at that point. And so they're just not reconnecting with people that they knew before in a way that's really meaningful for them. And so we'll need to keep an eye out for that. So if we have somebody come back and we reach out to them and we want to do stuff with them, and they're not busy, but they just keep putting us off.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's wise. Have you guys, being a female soldier, do you
I feel like I'm complete opposite, because I guess my experience is not just from deployment, but how I grew up. I internalize things. I let it bottle up, and then when it gets to the point of no return, I just let it all come out at once. Or I might be the I cry behind closed doors kind of person. Like, I don't always, like, sometimes when I'm in the heat of the moment, I might show anger or whatever, but if it's something that's really bothering me, you could probably never tell that something was bothering me, because I don't want people to, like, I don't know how to explain it, not feel bad for me, but like, I just don't wear my feelings on my sleeve, I guess.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, for a lot of women, it's normal, especially if you grew up in a household. I'm not saying this is how you grew up, but especially if you grew up in a household where showing feelings was not okay, or not allowed, or not, just not okay. Mm-hmm. So, and that can look different for everybody. So I think all of us can relate to that on a level,
Yeah.
Wanting to not show too much, don't want to show vulnerability, don't want to show what we're really going through. But, I always go back to when we're able to be vulnerable with people that we trust, that's where the really healing can happen for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I think also whether it's for a male soldier, female soldier, male spouse, female spouse, taking the step from this is how I feel or something's not right inside of me to I need to get help and I'm going to go call somebody, right? And what I see is typically one of two things happen that are let's say dysfunctional, right? Ideally, we see that, we go get help, call the chaplain, call the local counselor, reach out for resources. When that doesn't happen, I typically see two patterns. So the first pattern is an ultimatum from somebody, right? It might be somebody in our family, it might be our spouse, might be our partner, whatever that looks like. They come to us and say, I am not living like this anymore. So you either get help or get out, right? So we kind of see that ultimatum. Or the other thing is we just kind of ignore the problem, and then those people around us, they just sort of sitting there waiting for that time bomb to explode, right? You talked about bottling it all up. They see something's not right. They don't know what to call it. Or maybe they've come to us and tried to talk to us about it, and we just push them off. And so they just sort of sit there and wait for that time bomb to explode, right? And then I know we talked about PTSD, and I had said I'm going to get into that in the next myth, right? So yeah, and I've been very open in the last part of my career about what I went through. So I came back, and for me, 2 events really pushed me into counseling. So I definitely fell into the ticking time bomb part of it. I remember I was driving on the way to work one morning, and somebody was tailgating me. And I was on a 1-lane or 2-lane road, and so I slowed down, and there was an opportunity to pass, and they did not take it. And then I sped up, probably going, telling on myself, but like maybe 60 and a 45, and not a school zone, and they sped up too, and so we got to a 4-way stop sign. And back then, it would have been Sergeant Beasley, I think, jumps out of the car and went back to have a discussion with them. What they probably saw was this really angry soldier screaming, running out of a vehicle towards them, and they jumped out. They turned around and just fled. And then I got to work, talked to my peers at work about this, jerk that had done this to me. And they were like, "You have a problem. You're the problem. You need to get help." And I think, when I saw it from that perspective, and thankfully my peers saw that, right? And so then I started seeking some help for anger at that point. The next big pivotal moment was after the next deployment, where I came back and was driving on I-20 just past, I think it was Monticello Road, and had a panic attack. So I'm driving down the road, panic attack, and I had a brand new job at that point. I was back, and what that looked like for me was that classic tightness in my chest. Felt like I was having a heart attack, and then lost all control of my emotions. I started just sobbing, crying, tears coming out. Barely got to the side of the road, and I'm sitting there going, "How can a commander in the National Guard break out into tears and just start sobbing? That's not right." And then the horror of it, what happens if this happened, because I can't control it, in front of my soldiers, right? Now that is not inspiring confidence, right? To see the commander break down and cry in front of everybody. That scared me so bad that on the spot on the side of the road, I called a counselor and said, "I need help. Can you see me?" And amazingly enough, they answered their phone and they said, "Come on over," which Lisa knows never happens in counseling. So, so that was really an amazing event for me. But saw the counselor, and they immediately, as soon as I walked in, like 5 minutes in, they're like, "You have PTSD. It's so obvious," And I'm like shaking, going, "I don't think I have it." "No, everything's fine." "Yeah." They're like, "No, you have it. We need to talk."
Yeah.
So can I just say, because I know that there are some current and retired National Guard service members who are hearing this and are listening, and I just want to say, I know that some of y'all out there are going through this, and you're not at a place where you're ready to call a counselor. But listen to Eric and his story, and there's hope. And I say this because every day, not every day, but, a good amount of time, this is what I hear. Yeah. "I'm not ready to go. This is normal." I'm like, no. And I can only do so much. I can only be that person that you confide in that one time who says, "Yes, this is something you need to go to the VA. We need to get you to the vet center. Let's make a plan." And then they disappear.
Yeah.
So you're not alone.
Absolutely not.
I have to put that plug in there because I know that some of them are probably listening and they know who they are.
That's right. And also I know the resistance I see the most is I don't want anybody else to know because I don't know what their reaction is going to be. Right. And so.
I should be over this by now.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's been 2 years. I should be fine.
Oh
yeah.
No, 10 years.
10 years. Okay. Yeah. Even longer. I know for me, the moment of kind of being more honest in a public way about this was in seeing a psychiatrist at Fort Jackson who asked me to actually write up a 1-page kind of how I went through therapy at the very end, what my experience was like. And then they actually passed it out at Fort Jackson. So with my name on it.
Wow.
So I kind of just came out publicly with that in a very public way at Fort Jackson. not in the Guard, right? Although I'm sure some Guard people found out. And because I was concerned like everybody else. What I found, though, was that all the way up and down the chain of command, nothing but support.
Right. Of course.
And I feel like that, at least in my personal experience, in no way affected, career decisions, opportunities, anything like that. I felt like everybody was supportive. I didn't walk around talking about it 24/7.
Right.
But, key people knew and understood what was going on and supported me through that.
Right.
So I think that, and I've always said this before, I am biased 100% towards the National Guard because I think we're more of a family than other organizations. And I think that family mentality that we have in the Guard that's so valuable is what helped me get through that. Yeah. So same thing. If you're not getting help or any of this you identify with, definitely reach out and get help because it will make a huge quality of life difference.
And I think it's important to say that people always think, well, it's going to hurt my career. It's going to hurt my career. No, asking for help never hurts your career. What hurts your career is if you don't get the help and your behaviors become more and more risky, or you are using drugs and alcohol. If you don't get that help and then it backfires on you, that's when your career is in jeopardy. So I know that sounds kind of like doesn't make sense, but asking for help is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, because mental health disorders or mental health concerns affect your performance. Whether you realize it or not, it affects your performance. And if you don't get help, it does affect your career.
Right. And recovery is so possible.
Absolutely.
It is so possible. Yeah. And we put labels on things and we diagnose. Yes, sometimes we have to do that. But, that's to give it a name and to understand the symptoms. That doesn't mean that you're going to have it for the rest of your life. It just means right now is what you're going through. And that label does not define you. If you let it define you, for sure.
Right.
But it's, from commander to counselor.
I know.
Like I keep saying, let's look at him,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, that's, I'm definitely not alone in that because there's many other people that have taken that same path. But if you look at the prevalence rate of different things, I know one that I looked up recently that shocked me was 1 out of 9 men will be diagnosed with major depressive disorder in their lifetime. 1 out of 9. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And you get a unit of 26, soldiers there together and you look around and say, wow, that's going to be quite a bit, and that's okay. It doesn't define our whole life. It's just that period in our life.
Yeah. Can I ask, do you feel like you specialize in private practice with military?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Military, primarily, individual work and couples work.
Okay.
That's the main focus of the practice.
And do you take TRICARE?
I am a certified TRICARE provider, yes. So very important, yeah.
So important.
Now, how many deployments have you been on, Eric?
Okay, so I've been on 2 deployments that are what we call the typical deployments, both of them to Iraq, both of them with the same unit, 251st RAOC. And I did go on another deployment. It was a different type of deployment back then because I'm old and I've been around a while. Back during the drug wars that we had in the early 90s, I did a deployment to Central and South America down there with that. So it was a different animal back then. Yeah.
Okay, so coming back from that third deployment, did you feel that you improved from your last 2 deployments where you're like, okay, I'm seeing the same footsteps that I walked through and I'm like, I'm making a better path. I'm going in a better direction than I went in the past. Did you feel like you went in a better direction coming back from deployment?
That. Yeah, I don't think I think I thought I was going to do much better. And I knew what I felt was I knew what to avoid. I knew what not to do. And so things in the very beginning that may have caused problems between my wife and I or with my family or with my job, I was like, I'm definitely not doing that this time, right? I'm going to avoid that kind of stuff. I know one of the things that, planning a vacation immediately after we come back, that was difficult because I was still mission oriented. And so, sitting on a beach for hours, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it, things like that. But I think I just tried to avoid the pitfalls and I didn't really try to do anything else. And that's going back to the myths that we were talking about earlier. That is the next one is that couples, the myth is that couples and soldiers believe that we need to keep the conversation light and airy, and let's not talk about anything that might upset anybody, and all of that as a means to get along, right? Let's make everything smooth, and let's just sort of whitewash everything so that everything's going to be okay, and down the road later on we'll deal with the real issues, right? In fact, the truth is we need to talk about those kind of things, right? If you have questions about either relationships or career or those kind of things, as they come up, you need to talk about them, right? If there's distress in your relationships, if you're having problems, we need to talk to those people, whether it's our spouse, whether it's our siblings, our extended family. We need to get those out because those only build, right, over time. And we have expectations on how we think everybody else should act and how we should act too. I heard a good quote, and I wished I could remember who said it. So we might have to go back later on and figure that out. Somebody gets credit, I just don't know who, which is that expectations are premeditated resentments.
Yep.
Yeah. And we have all these expectations. And so in reality, what we need to do is as these questions come up, right, as we have disagreements with our spouse or someone else in our life after homecoming, don't whitewash them. Take the time to talk about them, right, in a positive way. If you're a spouse talking to the service member, don't be afraid to bring things up, right? As long as we're doing it in a non-confrontational way, and also don't label. So we talked about labeling and kind of why we diagnose, but that's something that a clinician does, right? We don't need to do that in our own relationships. So if you see signs of PTSD in a friend or in a spouse or family member, we don't want to go to them and say, dude, you've got PTSD. You need to get help, because now we've labeled them and they're going to feel like they're less. What we want to do is see, hey, you seem a little anxious. Have you thought about talking to somebody about that or something along those lines instead, and address the symptoms, not what we think the diagnosis is. In marriage counseling, often what I hear, the two most popular things in marriage counseling, my husband's a narcissist, right? And my wife is bipolar.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Those are the two things. They come in. I do an individual session when I start with each of them, and the wife says, I don't want to color what you think, but my husband's a narcissist. You need to know. And then the husband comes in and said, you would not believe it. She's like classic bipolar. I Googled it on WebMD.
So,
certified.
Right there.
Yeah.
Right there.
And
And what does that usually mean, though? What's the underlying issue there? Just speaking generally, is there's a hurt in the family that hasn't been resolved.
Right.
There's issues between them that they're not resolving. They're not able to resolve on their own, and so they need the support of a professional.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that there's no hope. It just means,
Yeah, they need help with a professional. What happens is we bring these things up, right? So I know my wife said, you need help. I think you have PTSD. Was telling me those things. Why is she doing that? She's doing that because she cares about me and she wants me to get help, right? What I see is someone who's labeling me and putting me down and telling me I'm not good enough.
Right.
So because I have, I don't feel that way, what am I going to do? I'm not going to agree with her. I'm going to prove she's wrong, right? And I always say as men, we have this ability to be a 13-year-old boy at moment's notice, right? And throw a temper tantrum. And so I was that 13-year-old boy. I was like, no, I don't. And she's like, you literally have this startle reflex and you can't sit with your back here. And I said, well, I'm just trying to keep you safe, You want somebody to hurt you and break in the house?
right.
And so we start defending. So when we avoid those labels, then we can just avoid all of that mess and just talk about the symptoms. Yeah. All right. So the last myth number 5. So the myth is reintegration gets easier after every deployment.
Yeah, and I don't believe that one at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And Sergeant Andrews, you even talked about that a little bit. Does it get easier, right? Yeah, absolutely. And so I came back from the next one thinking I know how to do this. I think I even remember talking to my wife and we're like, we've already been through Yellow Ribbon. We checked that block last deployment. We don't even have to go.
We don't have to go.
I know. We don't need to go. We're good. We already know everything we need to know.
Walk in, check mark.
Yeah.
Good to go.
Yeah.
You could lead it.
Yeah.
You could actually get up there and lead it, probably.
Yeah. I don't care if you go to family support group meetings. It doesn't matter. We know everything, right? That's for the new people, right? Yeah. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Every deployment's unique, right? Every time we deploy, it's with a different set of people. It's a different circumstance, all of that. And it has unique challenges. And so all I did was become more unprepared for coming back the next time, right? And so, and that deployment, kind of like what you were saying, Sergeant Baker, with the active duty coming back, the second time we transitioned very fast through the demob site, very fast. And so I think it was, I don't know exactly, but I want to say from the time we left country to the time we were home was like 5 days. It was like insanely fast. And so, you know, 1 minute I'm wearing body armor and the next minute I'm, you know, playing in the pool with my kids. Right. And that was difficult. And I thought I knew everything, so I'm good. Yeah.
Well, and I don't think it like all those are definitely factors in that, but also when you deploy for a second, third, fourth time, you're at a different stage in your life. You're a little bit older. You've experienced different things, or your career might have changed. You might have went back to school. Like you might have had a kid, got married. So things are different than, like, if I were to deploy again, it would be totally different than 6 years ago when I had first deployed and I was 21, 22. Like I'm a lot older now. I've done a lot of things. Like I'm starting a career and everything. So, and I'm in my military career for almost 9 years now. So, I mean, like, things are different than then. Right. So you have to see it differently, I guess. Yeah. And you still need all those tools. Like, you have them, but things have changed with those as well. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it is unique. You are different, different person, different career. You mentioned kids. Our kids are different.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things for me for the deployments is I went to a deployment, came back, went through OCS and OBC accelerated, and then immediately within a few months redeployed. And my youngest daughter was born 6 weeks before my first deployment. And I was essentially gone roughly 48 out of 60 months of her life in the first 5 years. So when I came back the second time, if I tried to force her to sit on my lap, she would cry. You know, I was like that weird uncle that just shows up on the holidays, right? Yeah, like cousin Eddie off of vacation or something, right? I just showed up now and then, you know, disrupted everything and then left. And that was much different on the second deployment because she didn't know me, didn't trust me. You know, and it took a long time to earn that trust. Yeah, with all of that. I did want to bring up one other thing, though. So we're talking about reintegration, but one of the things we do in the military, besides deploy, right, is some of the extended schools that we go to. So when we leave for a school for 3, 6, 9 months at a time, which happens all the time, we go through a lot of these same steps. You know, even stateside, where we can video chat and possibly even fly back now and then, but we never get back into that rhythm with our family until the school's over. So even if we're not talking deployments, I think it's wise to look at this stuff and be aware of it so we can make sure that we're in the healthiest place possible through all of this.
Yeah, I definitely agree to that because not too long ago, I was in Maryland for 4 months reclassing. And I mean, I wasn't far from home, but I wasn't close enough to be able to go on the weekends and stuff. And then you meet new people, you make new friends, you have new experiences. You're on a schedule just like when you're deployed. And then when it's done and over with, it's like, now what do I do with myself? Like, I've been doing this for 4 months straight. And then you go home and it's the same thing. You got to start all over again and make sure you take time to yourself and all that kind of stuff. So it applies to everything, I feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, again, I'm glad that you guys were able to come and talk. I know that I say this every single time, but I'm sure we will see you again. And I'll make sure that we link all the previous videos as well as your contact information down in the comments below. And you guys are always welcome to come back and see us anytime you want.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and we will catch you guys in the next episode.